extra. Take care.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Iran buried some of the 290 victims from its downed airliner today. A U.S. military team in the Persian Gulf, meanwhile, was beginning its investigation of the mistaken attack by a U.S. Navy cruiser. In Washington, President Reagan seemed to be looking for a way to quieten the confrontation quickly. The president is studying the idea of paying money to families of the victims. Our report begins with Tom Fenton in London.
They marched through the streets chanting the familiar cries of "Death to America." Iranian TV tonight showed the first funerals of the victims of the ill-fated Iran Air jetliner. The plane left from Bandar Abbas, and the coffins carried the victims who lived in this port city. The thousands of mourners marched through the streets, declaring war until victory, and our nation will never submit to force. Iran continues to search the waters of the Gulf for more bodies. An intense effort is being made to find the plane's black box, which could prove Iran's claim that the airliner was on course and climbing. Foreign journalists brought into Bandar Abbas for the funeral were shown a makeshift morgue containing still unidentified bodies. Wreckage of the plane was also on display. Iran is pressing its sudden propaganda gain, making sure this tragedy doesn't slip from the front pages. Moderate forces in Iran, led by Speaker of the Parliament Rafsanjani, have been successful in holding back extremist reactions to the downing of the plane. The Lebanese terrorist group that announced yesterday it would kill an American hostage said today, at the request of Rafsanjani, the execution of American Terry Anderson is postponed. Tom Fenton, CBS News, London.
It turns out that the plane disaster happened at a time when President Reagan and Iran were once again trying to open up some kind of new diplomatic dialogue. That may help to explain why the president is taking such a conciliatory line toward the Ayatollah, even favoring the idea of payments to the victims' families. Wyatt Andrews reports from the State Department.
Hello, Dan. The idea of paying reparations comes from a policy that basically says it's just simply a good thing to do. For the moment, however, it's in the hands of the lawyers. And the lawyers are in a quandary about not doing anything, not paying any money that would signify that the U.S. has done anything morally wrong or that the military committed a morally reprehensible act. You're going to see two things. You're going to see a change in the vocabulary of the U.S. government over the next couple of days. They don't want to call it reparations anymore. They want to call it human compensations. That's because reparations implies guilt. The other thing that they've pretty well decided on is that any money paid, Dan, would go to the families of the victims and not to the government of the Ayatollah.
Well, Wyatt, there was also talk again today of President Reagan trying to strike some new deal with Ayatollah Khomeini. What's all that about?
What happened, Dan, over the last year and as recently as the last 2 months, Iran has been sending backdoor feelers, back-channel feelers to the United States, basically asking, do you want to resume talks with us? 2 months ago, the United States sent a very direct message through the Swiss to the Iranians saying the answer is yes, we do want to talk, but no backdoor stuff. So far, the Iranians have not responded to that message.
Thank you, Wyatt. More than 3 days after the attack, questions are still multiplying about the events that led the U.S. Navy captain to his decision to fire. Our Pentagon correspondent David Martin has been looking into the questions.
Defense Secretary Frank Carlucci briefed senators today on the downing of the Iran Airbus as the Pentagon seemed to back off this key feature in its original version of events.
The suspect aircraft was outside the prescribed commercial air corridor.
That was one of the reasons used to justify the Pentagon's contention that the captain of the Vincennes acted properly, although mistakenly, in shooting down the Iran Airbus. But members of Congress briefed in secret by Pentagon officials are now hearing a different story.
That the airliner that was flying was off course by about 4 miles. It did not mean it was outside the corridor. It was still, as I understand it, within the corridor, but 4 miles west of the center line of the corridor.
Since the air corridor is 20 miles wide at that point, being 4 miles off the center line would still leave the Airbus well within the corridor. Although, as the Pentagon points out, being in the corridor is no guarantee an aircraft is friendly.
Military aircraft world over, as part of their tactical missions, they plan their missions so that they fly in civil aviation corridors until they get as close to their target as possible. Then they jump out of the corridor and do their job.
The Iran Air pilot apparently realized he was off center and turned left to move back toward the middle, with fatal consequences.
Then it turned and moved toward the center line of the corridor, and in doing that it was coming directly at the ship, the Vincennes, and the Vincennes then went ahead and took this as added evidence that the plane had hostile intent towards the ship.
There was other evidence of hostile intent, most notably the fact that the Iran Airbus was sending out an electronic signal identifying itself as a military aircraft. But Pentagon officials briefing Congress are now acknowledging at least the possibility that signal could have come from someplace else. There was an Iranian military plane aloft at the time, a P-3 surveillance aircraft, but Pentagon officials say it was headed in a different direction.
That was just mentioned as a possibility, but not something that they were saying that this was what happened. They said we just don't know. It could have been even a separate aircraft.
Pentagon officials say they are confident the high-tech equipment aboard the Vincennes could not make a mistake like that, even though no one can understand why a civilian airliner would identify itself as a military aircraft. There is a lot about the Pentagon version no one can understand.
The aircraft headed directly for Vincennes on a constant bearing at high speed, approximately 450 knots.
Airline pilots say it is unheard of for a commercial airliner to go that fast at the relatively low altitude of 9,000 feet.
Had gone up in altitude and was increasing or decreasing in altitude as it neared the ship.
Airline pilots do not understand why the Airbus was descending when it should have been climbing to a cruising altitude above 20,000 feet. Those are questions to be answered by the team of investigators now aboard the Vincennes, which is tied up in port while other U.S. Navy ships patrol the Gulf, apparently with other things on their mind. No one is suggesting the Pentagon is putting out misleading information in an attempt to justify the downing of the Iranian airplane. The concern is investigators will find out that the data Captain Will Rogers relied on in making his decision to fire was wrong. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The U.S. and the Soviet Union gave more signs today that they do not intend to let the airliner tragedy upset their improving relations. The Soviets' top military commander, Marshal Sergei Akramelyak, arrived in Washington for a scheduled tour of U.S. military installations. And the two countries announced plans for extensive military exchanges over the next 2 years. A ceremony was held today in Bandar Abbas, Iran, commemorating those who died aboard the ill-fated airliner. After that, the chief pilot for Iran Air, the man who trained the pilot of the downed airliner, spoke to reporters en route back to Tehran.
Why would he not answer American calls to identify himself and to move out of the zone?
Due to congestion of air traffic in that area, considering the number of the places he has to be in contact to tell his position, which is Tehran control, which is Bandar Abbas approach control, which is our radar control in the area, which is Dubai control, to give them the estimate time to crossing the Iranian airspace into Emirate airspace. Considering the number of the radios we have on the Airbus for frequency for communication, which are only 2 radios, but he has to be in contact intermittently for 5 different places at the time that he might have been called. I don't say that he has been called. At the time that he might have been called to correct his routing and his course, which now this I have to talk about it later because I don't find it anything wrong with his course, and I can prove it to you.
The chief pilot of Iran Air. A judge in Pakistan today sentenced 5 young Palestinians to hang for the bloody hijacking of a Pan American aircraft 2 years ago. 21 people were killed when the siege ended with Pakistani troops storming aboard the Pan Am airliner at the Karachi airport. The defendants said they will appeal the death sentences. The leader of the 5 said if they ever get out, they'll hijack another plane. On this day after the announcement of his pending resignation, Attorney General Edwin Meese paid a White House visit and continued his public relations offensive. It also was a day in which the names of Meese's possible successor surfaced. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braver reports on those names and on the controversy that still swirls around the nation's chief law enforcement officer.
Edwin Meese took his show on the road today, appearing on 3 network morning programs to repeat his claim that he has been vindicated by the independent counsel's failure to indict him. Meese rejected suggestions that he'd placed his office under a cloud.
No, I don't believe there's any cloud at all. As a matter of fact, both the office and the department have been operating very well.
Meese's staff even put out a list of his accomplishments, beefing up the effort against drugs, for example.
He almost single-handedly brought together the Drug Policy Board and and made a major initiative there that I think is going to last into the future.
But critics predict Attorney General Meese will be remembered most for controversy. Questions about his personal finances that led to an earlier independent counsel investigation. His failure to take notes when he launched the first administration review of the Iran-Contra affair. His support for two ill-fated Supreme Court nominees, Douglas Ginsburg and Robert Bork. And of course, the current investigation of his dealings with his old friend, Bob Wallach.
I think the Meese years represent a low water mark in the history of the recent history of the Justice Department. His leadership was uninspired. It was characterized by cronyism.
While Meese went to make a White House courtesy call, others were speculating on his successor.
I think former Senator Paul Laxalt is a very able lawyer.
Other possible strategies, someone already in the Justice Department, Acting Deputy Attorney General Harold Christensen, a current or former cabinet member, Energy Secretary Donald Hodel, or an elder statesman, Nixon and Ford advisor Dean Birch. Administration officials stress that the selection process is just beginning. Though White House aides long believed Ed Meese should leave, no one wanted to anger the president by looking for a replacement. Rita Braver, CBS News at the Justice Department.
And still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, new CBS News reporter James Hattori on the continuing flood of illegal immigrants from Mexico. And Gary Reeves on the dwindling of ducks due to drought.
A 100 times a day I used to hear, "Mom, where's the mustard?" or, "Honey, I can't find the ice cream." But not with our new Whirlpool refrigerator. The shelves slide out so you can reach food way at the back. And with the slide-out baskets in the freezer, nothing gets hidden away.
Oh, by the way, honey, you see my golf clubs?
If they're in there, you'll find them.
We're making your world a little easier. Whirlpool.
Remember when we said that stuff about for richer, for poorer?
I do.
Well, then how come your coffee looks darker than mine?
Mine's decaffeinated Folgers Crystals. Yours is the decaffeinated you always drink.
Did you use the same amount?
Sure. These dark, sparkling crystals are made from Folgers mountain-grown beans.
Really rich.
Sip. Love it?
I do.
You do?
I do.
You're crazy about me.
I am.
Trust me.
Decaffeinated Folgers Crystals. So dark and rich. Shouldn't you switch?
It's Lobster Fest time at Red Lobster. We know what you love the most. At our Lobster Fest, we do lobster best. No one else even comes close.
From $8.95, kids just 99 cents.
Have a tempting lobster trio, Mornay, if you're in the mood. Our tails are the best at our Lobster Fest. We know how you love seafood.
Now get a half pound of snow crab legs for just $3.95 with any entree.
The Senate late today voted overwhelmingly to pass what's called the plant closing bill. It requires many U.S. companies to give 60-day advance notice before closing a large plant or ordering a mass layoff. This bill now goes to the House, where passage is considered certain. Only 2 weeks away from his expected Democratic nomination for president, Michael Dukakis was still mulling prospective running mates today. At the same time, his likely Republican opponent, George Bush, was in Texas trying to bolster his hopes among the Hispanic vote. Dukakis will be there tomorrow, trying to do the same thing. Our report on the candidates in the campaign begins with Jacqueline Adams and the Bush campaign.
In Dallas today, George Bush breathed a sigh of relief. With Attorney General Edwin Meese's resignation, the Democrats, he said, can't attack him on the sleaze issue.
Certainly, I will be delighted that I will not be asked questions about this matter all the time.
Bush also took a hard line on events in the Persian Gulf. If he were president, he said, he wouldn't apologize to Iran.
We've expressed regrets, and that is adequate.
But Bush's main goal in Dallas today, wooing Hispanic voters. He promised them a spot in his cabinet.
And if I become president, my cabinet will be composed of the very best men and women, at least one of whom, finally, will be a Hispanic American. It is time.
Bush made this promise, which he said he'd make to no other group, as he tries to repeat Ronald Reagan's record showing among Hispanic voters in 1984. Some Hispanic leaders say Bush has already made a good start.
He is sensitive to a number of issues on bilingual education, for example. He's sensitive to
Hispanic aspirations.
But Hispanics care more about jobs, education, the quality of life in their neighborhoods. And the statistics show that the Reagan-Bush years have not been good for them. Nationwide, the Hispanic poverty rate is up. Their high school dropout rate is nearly 50%. And their unemployment is twice that of most other Americans.
Reagan fed Hispanic Americans that this is morning America. Well, for Latinos, it's been mañana, the promises of mañana.
Bush insists his appeal for Hispanic votes is from the heart.
I have what is known as a simpatico feeling. I think I understand the heartbeat of the Hispanic community.
But the vice president and his strategists know that unless he pulls at least a quarter of the Hispanic vote this fall, he could lose the White House. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, Dallas.
Another in a steady line of vice presidential hopefuls marched through Boston today for an audience with Michael Dukakis. This time it was Indiana Congressman Lee Hamilton's turn.
Whoever he chooses for his vice president candidate, I will support enthusiastically and wholeheartedly because I want to win this election.
The dog days of summer have come early for the Dukakis campaign, and it's sweating in the heat. The parade of vice presidential contenders to Dukakis' doorstep, 4 since July 4th, is beginning to resemble Walter Mondale's unruly process in 1984, something Dukakis said he would never do. The campaign that ran through the primary season like a well-oiled machine is showing signs of strain.
Well, there's a little switching gears that takes place. You're getting out of the primary mode, where you merely fought to win an election each week or every other week.
Despite claims of party unity, Dukakis is still trying to iron out platform differences with Jesse Jackson before the convention, less than 2 weeks away. Dukakis tried to reach out to Jackson's core constituency today, meeting with 20 national black leaders. Republicans are also turning up the heat on Dukakis. Today, Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania came to the State House in Boston to blast the state's controversial prison furlough program. He was met by some 20 law enforcement officials who backed Dukakis.
There are a great many questions which are raised by this furlough system, which Governor Dukakis yet has to answer.
Dukakis is getting more bad news from the polls. Nationally, his once wide lead over Bush is closing, and a new Massachusetts poll shows that while he's still ahead, Dukakis is even losing ground here in his home state. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Boston.
Federal officials today announced an agreement designed to promote more safety and ease tensions between labor and management at Eastern Airlines. The pact, signed by both sides, sets up a series of committees to hear grievances and handle disputes over safety procedures. A government report last month said Eastern's labor troubles had to be settled before they become a safety threat.
If the guys who made women's insoles had to wear women's shoes, they'd make a very different insole. Look who has. New odor eaters for women. The first insole designed for a woman's shoe to cushion without crowding.
Ordinary insoles are shaped like men's shoes, but odor eaters for women are tapered at the toe so they can't crowd, and shaped and contoured to cushion where your foot needs it most.
There's no tightness, and shoes stay fresh and odor-free.
New odor eaters for women. Cushions without crowding.
I used to have all different kinds of pain relievers in my medicine cabinet. But when I went in the hospital, my doctor gave me Tylenol. It took care of the pain, and just as important, it did it without irritating my stomach like aspirin, or even ibuprofen can. Today, my medicine cabinet has just one pain reliever in it, Tylenol. It's the only one I need.
Trust Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
When you buy Corning prescription lenses that change, it's like getting free light tints, free medium tints, dark tints, and a range of free sunglasses all in one. Corning lenses that change, the only eyeglasses you'll ever need.
Do you get more than you want from your high-fiber cereal, like sodium and added sugar? Get Fiber One. It has more fiber and it's low in sodium and has no added sugar. Get more of the fiber your body needs and less of the stuff it doesn't. Fiber One.
If you've been following our concentration of coverage in Mexico, you know this is election day in our neighbor country to the south. Mexicans are voting for a new president and Congress. Official and final results won't be known until next week. What is known is that the ruling party and probable winner faces strong competition from both the right and left because of Mexico's many problems. Among those problems are inflation and unemployment. And as James Hattori now reports, that's what keeps Mexicans crossing the border into this country in spite of all the new barriers.
19 months after immigration reform, little has changed along the Rio Grande. Illegals cross the river into the U.S. as though commuting to work. Many of them are. Despite a beefed-up border patrol and get-tough penalties against employers who hire undocumented workers, they still come, they still work.
I don't believe that we can say that employer sanctions are really turning the tide yet on the border.
Need to get it cut off. Got a bunch coming in.
The tide of illegal traffic has actually grown since Congress reformed immigration laws in 1986. Border Patrol arrests are up about 12% so far this year.
For as much as the United States has tried to retake control of its borders, it cannot control one of the most critical factors, Mexico's devastated economy, which continues to drive workers from their homes.
In dirt-poor ranch towns like Casaderos, people know little of immigration policy or sanctions or green cards. It's an existence driven simply by the need to survive in an economy suffering from 160% inflation, 50% unemployment or underemployment. Workers earn $4 or $5 a day when there is work. For Dario Ara, it's not enough. Casaderos may be home, but the U.S. is where the money is. And if laws are tougher, so is his resolve.
They still go. They still go. I don't know why. I'm gonna go too.
Most every family in Casaderos has someone who has gone, and it takes a toll. Maria de la Luz says it's sad people have to go. The men forget about those left behind. Some don't return.
La migración de trabajadores mexicanos a los Estados Unidos.
Carlos Salinas de Gortari, the expected winner in today's presidential election, calls the migration of Mexican workers to America a tragic reality. He's sympathetic to their plight, but offers little hope. U.S. officials maintain their policies will eventually deter illegals from coming. But until better times south of the border, what may be surprising is not that so many come in spite of the law, but that so many more don't. James Hattori, CBS News, Dallas.
Moscow confirmed more violence today in Armenia, where Soviet troops battled with protesters trying to shut down the main airport. Dissident sources say up to 5 people were killed when the troops opened fire. Soviet officials insist 36 people were injured, but none killed. In Yugoslavia, more than 1,000 striking factory workers broke through police lines and occupied the parliament building for half an hour. No one was hurt, but the protest was unprecedented in the history of communist Yugoslavia.
When your coffee's smooth and easy, like Sunday morning, and it tastes your way.
It's necessarily Nescafe, great coffee blends to taste your way. That's necessarily Nescafe.
You know, there's nothing like a winner. That's why I'm driving this, the Advanced Big Ford Pickup. America's best-selling pickup for 11 straight years. And I got more for my money with this special model. It cost me over $800 less than a comparably equipped Chevy. And I really go for Ford's advanced features, like multi-port fuel-injected engines and anti-lock rear brakes. Yeah, Ford. If you don't go with a proven winner, what are you going with?
Now get a $500 cash bonus from Ford on manual transmission F-Series pickups.
I used to think that entering the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes wasn't very important.
Until I won us $1 million.
Now it's more important than ever for you to enter the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes, because you can win $10 million. And if you hurry, there's a whole other $1 million you can win if your lucky number appears on TV this August 11th. So look for the house and enter the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes right away.
Come on, send it in.
The heat goes on. The relentless drought that's been deep-frying much of the nation continued to sizzle today. Temperatures in the 90s stretched across much of the country. And already the drought has dimmed the promise of one of the nation's great spectacles, what has been a silhouetted migration against autumn's brilliant blue skies. Gary Reeves tells us about it.
This is where 50% of America's waterfowl come to nest, in the fertile potholes of the Dakotas and southern Canada. But the drought has dried up half of these prairie ponds.
We're not doing too good so far. There's not a whole lot nesting.
Scientists for the Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Center have been studying mallard ducks here all year. They put transmitters on 175 hens, but so far only 9 have hatched successful broods. Most didn't even try.
We're seeing dramatic declines in waterfowl populations to the point where we think it's going to be very difficult for them to recover.
Crop failure has also had an effect on the waterfowl, placing them in competition with farmers like Terry Presler, whose oat fields are a complete loss.
This year the feed is pretty short. Could be a lot better.
To replace the lost feed, farmers here have been allowed to harvest hay from the same high grass the ducks need to hide their nest.
There was considerable concern before the onset of the drought, and this certainly will just make the conditions worse.
Farmers say there are so few nests, the damage the mowers do is incidental, while the hay they harvest is essential.
We're in a disaster, and we have to do what we have to do.
There are expected to be so few ducks flying south this fall, the federal government has proposed delaying the hunting season in 14 states. Experts say this year's birds are in such bad shape, it may take several years for them to stage their comeback.
The heat continues. If the drought continues, the survival of those young ducklings, as I said before, they're doomed. They just can't survive.
The farmers' troubles may be washed away by steady rains this summer, but the season has already passed for the nation's waterfowl. Gary Reeves, CBS News, Dickey County, North Dakota.
And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. Dan Rather. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Nothing should come between you and your pet except the Hearts 2-in-1 collar. The collar that kills fleas and ticks for 5 months. Keeps them off your pet and out of your home. Go ahead. Hug, snuggle, tickle him. The Hearts 2-in-1 collar lets you get close to your pet without getting close to fleas and ticks. If you want to hug a happier pet and have peace of mind, get the Hearts 2-in-1 collar.
Tonight, Dad raised the son's fridge. He practically lived in mine. I'd always tell him, stay away from the big 3, salt, fat, calories, and watch the cholesterol. That's what Doc always told me. Looks like he did listen.
Fleischmann's Light, 25% less salt, fat, and calories than regular margarine, and no cholesterol.
Watching out for the big 3, Dad? Yeah, I listened. Most of the time.
Fleischmann's Light.
Dentuaries. I want to get fresh with you. With my Mint Fresh Polident. It's got a minty mouthwash ingredient, so it freshens up dentures as it cleans tough stains. Try Super Strength Polident Green, the mouth-freshening clean. Ah.
I used to take aspirin for minor arthritis pain, but it sometimes upset my stomach, so I switched from aspirin to Advil. Advil gives me hours of relief from arthritis pain, and it's gentler to my stomach than aspirin. Advil, advanced medicine for pain.
I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Tomorrow, Barbara Bush on her husband's bid for the presidency.
And Johnny Five, the robot star of Short Circuit 2 on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.
Coming up on Eyewitness News, one of the Kentucky escapees is caught and how a hike in the sales tax could hit Nashvillians in the pocketbook.
And why a harmless outdoor grill can turn very destructive during these dry times. Plus, we'll tell you about the bug invasion during the drought of '88.
And a reason to celebrate in Brownsville, Kentucky. These stories and more after this.
America's going bananas at Baskin-Robbins over irresistible Banana Royales. Just $1.49.
Oh, Baskin-Robbins, you're America's ice cream treat.